Snow and ice both get a mention in this week's Met Office 10-day trend. It is turning colder, but how long will the colder weather last? Let's take a look at the big picture first of all, and the jet stream, that fast-moving ribbon of air high up in the atmosphere. It's kind of split into two, taking two trains of areas of low pressure. This one in particular of interest, likely to bring some damaging winds and torrential rain to parts of mainland Europe. That is the remnants of Kirk, ex-Hurricane Kirk, now Storm Kirk, heading its way in, bringing some, let's say, potentially very damaging conditions to parts of France, the Low Countries and Germany. There are amber and red warnings in place across Europe. But it's staying to the south of the UK. It's still impacting our weather because as it clears, it's opening the door to northerly winds, bringing much colder conditions. Low pressure has been dominating all through this week, bringing lots of heavy showers. That is scooting away as Kirk spreads northwards and clears away too. But it's also clearing away the slightly milder air, and the cold air already in place floods down as the northerly winds set in for Thursday and Friday. So it is going to turn quite a bit colder. But for most of us, quite a bit brighter as well. Not completely dry on Thursday. There'll still be a few showers around, particularly scattered across parts of the east, and a fairly brisk wind bringing even more of a chill. These are the temperatures, touch below average for most, some spots staying in single figures. And when you add that wind on, particularly along these North Sea coasts, this is what it'll feel like. 6 or 7 degrees Celsius. So that's quite a change compared to what we had to start the week. So it is going to turn colder both by day and by night because the clear skies with the winds falling light will allow temperatures to fall down to below freezing. These are the temperatures in towns and cities not far off freezing, some actually hitting zero for Friday morning, and rural spots will be a few degrees below. Not quite as cold, you'll notice, across Scotland because here we've got more cloud and some showery rain moving in. That'll help to keep the temperatures up, but with the colder air in place, over the mountains, yes, you can pick out a few blobs of white. On the Scottish mountains, there will be some snow in the showers, and even at lower levels as we go through the weekend, there could be a little bit of sleet and snow, particularly across Shetland. What about into the weekend then? Well, it's a messy old picture. The pressure and the jet stream kind of all over the place. Still split in two, really, the jet stream. So we still have two tracks of low pressure systems. This one again bringing some wet and windy conditions to northern Spain and Portugal. And then we have a trail of weather fronts across the north, bringing more cloud and showery rain as we go into the weekend. But further south, between the two streams of jet stream, we generally have higher pressure moving in, and that should bring much of the south a fine couple of days. That weather front, though, there is some doubt about exactly where it sits, so that's a bit of a question mark, particularly for Saturday. This is the spaghetti plot from the European computer model. When we run it many times, what's called an ensemble, and each one of these lines is a potential position of that weather front. And considering how far ahead this is, only 3 days for Saturday, there's quite a spread, quite a range of where that weather front could be. It's not a particularly significant weather front, but it could bring some showers to parts of the south. Apart from that, though, with high pressure nearby, much of the south for Friday and Saturday should be dry, whereas further north we will have a lot of cloud and some showers moving through on both days. Staying fairly chilly through the course of Friday and Saturday as well, and cold enough, particularly on Saturday night after the showers in here, for some icy conditions on Sunday morning. What about Sunday, though, in the broader terms? Well, this is the European model projection for Sunday. High pressure in control, but quite a lot of cold air in place. If we compare that to the Met Office model, it doesn't really push that weather front further south, and so we've got much milder air in place for Sunday across the UK. I think the more likely scenario is the European model, with the front dipping further south and introducing chillier conditions. But just showing that for the comparison, both are largely dry across much of the UK, but that difference in the air across the country. So yes, high pressure is likely to dominate through certainly the south during the weekend, keeping things largely dry, but it could be quite a chilly old start to Sunday. And then the high starts to waddle away. So as we go into next week, we've kind of got this battle set up with a stubborn large area of high pressure somewhere over the near continent, low pressure systems trying to get in from the northwest. The jet is still in this kind of split mode, and one arm of it pushing the low pressure systems up towards the northwest. There are some tropical features. This one behind me, that is Milton, currently barreling in towards Florida. It won't be a hurricane by this stage, probably, as it drifts over the other side. And it's not at this stage likely to be heading its way north, but something to keep an eye on, other tropical systems further south. But for the UK, we're concentrating on what's going on with this battleground between high pressure sitting over the near continent and low pressure trying to push in. And yeah, it's just a question of which one will win out the most, it looks like, as we go through much of next week, because the low pressure is likely to bring some wet and windy conditions, high pressure generally promising dry and fine conditions. It looks like the high will dominate for the early part of next week, but how long it lasts, that's the big question mark. So with the high pressure sitting here, low pressure sitting here, that's going to generate southwesterly winds. So that will bring milder air from the Atlantic, but also over a large body of water, it's going to bring cloud and outbreaks of rain. If the high is in a slightly different position, however, I mean, it's a very similar setup with the high and the low, but if the high is a little further north, holding the low pressures a little more at bay, well, that would generate winds generally coming in from the south or southwest. So a subtle difference in that area of high pressure could mean very different flavors of weather. That would keep things largely dry. Both would lift the temperatures. Now, over recent computer model runs, there's been a bit of a change of heart. This is the European model run showing the different flavors of weather going from 0 to 100. The different colored bars are different, I say, different regimes, different types of weather. The red's marked here for the early part of next week. That's indicative of a Scandinavian high, where the high pressure is sitting over Scandinavia. That second scenario I showed you with the winds more coming up from the south or the southeast. The pale blues, that's more of a southwesterly trend. And if we go back from the previous couple of runs, you can see that that was more favoured a couple of days ago for the early part of next week. But now the most likely scenario is that high is going to be closer and more dominant, but it's a kind of 50-50 shot. As we saw, there's not a lot of difference in the general pattern of weather, but it makes a subtle difference to the type of weather that we see. So the blues and the reds almost making up 50-50 when we look at the multi-model combination for the early part of next week. So that's something we need to closely monitor over the next few days. But then the main theme, notice that the paler blues are the much more likely regime as we go through the second half of next week. So this setup is the most likely through the second half of next week, with the high pressure just drifting a little bit further away, the lower pressure closer to the north and the west, and that means the winds will be coming up from the southwest rather than the south or the southeast. And as I said, when the winds are coming from the southwest, coming over a lot of water, that generates a lot of cloud and some outbreaks of rain, particularly in western areas. But the closer you are to the high, so the further east you are, the more likely it is that you'll keep the drier weather for longer. So that's the big question mark about next week, whether the high sits closer or further away, and just how far in the wet and the windy weather comes in from the west. But generally, it's going to be milder, whether the winds are coming from the southeast or the southwest. After that chillier spell through the weekend, it will turn milder as we go through next week. As always, this is the 10-day trend, where we're just looking at the trends of potential scenarios. If you want that day-to-day detail, do keep up to date with the forecast. And the best way to do that, of course, is to hit subscribe on YouTube and follow us on social media.